Hello and welcome to this next panel. We're focusing on innovation in AI and blockchain technology. So we're tweaking things just a little. And how those technologies are being applied to for the good of humanity. My name is Seamus McAteer. I'm with AI Fund currently. It was a fund started by a gentleman called Andrew Ng, who is probably the godfather of AI, it's fair to say. And but I'm a repeat entrepreneur. I actually used to come to this part of the world when I was a kid with my dad, who's from Fannet Head, just up the road. So it feels really good to be here in this context. And I have to dart after this to go up and see some of my cousins, or I'll be killed. But it's great to be here. We've got an illustrious panel. And just to put things in context, like AI, mixed reputation, people are kind of afraid of it. We're moving, the context of general intelligence, and we'll be working for the machines, and it's going to disintermediate human activity is something that's a little bit scary. And blockchain technology, what's it good for? We've seen the demise just in the last week of UST, which was supposed to be pegged to the US dollar. Several, 30 billion or something wiped out. Is it a pyramid scheme? So these gentlemen are going to address those issues amongst others. So I'll go down the line and we'll start with you, Sergio, just to talk a little bit about how you're applying blockchain technology to do something useful.
Okay, thank you, first of all. I'm Sergio, I'm coming from Spain, and I have the bad idea, let's say, 3 years ago to create my own company, and we are working with blockchain technology. As we said, blockchain is like a new technology, everyone is speaking about it, everyone has a big fear about what is going to happen with that technology, but we are applying that in business processes. That means, thanks to blockchain technology, we can keep the traceability and the transparency of all the processes that we are developing nowadays in the business, and also with digital proofs that are demonstrated legally. We have been the first company demonstrated that, and now we are working with many companies in Spain, especially because they have a big problem in that aspect, because they spend a lot of time in administrative processes in order to demonstrate. Thanks to us, they are making that in a few minutes with blockchain technology.
Okay, and just hold that thought. And before I get to you, John, Xavier, just a little bit about what you're doing is super relevant here in the Gaeltacht area. You're from the Basque Country. Talk a little bit about how you're applying AI technology in the context of culture and language.
Yeah, as you said, I think that new technology is scary because it's powerful, but it can be powerful too to help us in a powerful way. So I'm from the Basque Country. I work in Eluyar Foundation, and we're working in building TTS systems for minority.
TTS, just to explain, is text-to-speech.
Yeah. So we create artificial voice that reads some text. So we're building, usually artificial intelligence needs huge amounts of data to be functional, to work well. So we're trying to work with a TTS system for minority languages and trying to use really small databases. Because to be minority languages means that you have really small public databases. So we're working to be efficient. We already made TTS systems for Occitan, that is a minority language in France. We made it for Basque too, and we're working with Galician and Catalan too, that are minority languages in Spain. The second step, once we have these TTS systems, is to build speech-to-speech translation systems that are like automatic dubbing systems that you speak in your language, and the systems obtain the text, translate it, and create the translation in artificial voice. And we're working in a special case of these speech-to-speech systems that we're trying to maintain the voice ID during all the process. So you can speak in a language, and you can obtain, in the end, your own voice speaking in a language that maybe you don't even know. So this would break barriers and communication between different communities and help maybe minority languages to be part of digital world, interconnected world, and yeah.
I have a feeling you're going to be mobbed by Uterus na Gaeltachta just after this. But John, why don't you put you work across technologies and you've got some personal experience. I know you've published a book that's been very well received here in Ireland that used AI in its production. But why don't you put things in context from your perch?
Sure. So, Gormaga Seamus, agus maybe Ardus Kami Jara Kupla Focal Asquelga, so Jugay Filagana agus Tana or some Ansha, and you Tishquil Mar Fain, Kasula la Ahar Seamus As Dunagal, agus Ta Ash Specialty Macree, Le Chirconnell, agus Kamala Shin. Marger Anna Gallagher Arare Tasunan go make Kangles Nua August Naskanu Nua Korhia Ijer Shipsha August Anach Anna Specialty August Anna Audin Asha. I was just saying that I hope you all make a special connection to Donegal. It's a place very special to my heart, as you heard. Seamus's dad is from Donegal. Happens my dad is from Donegal as well, from Glenties, which is just out of here. And yeah, so the story that you were saying there, Seamus, about the books, and I think many Irish people would either bless me or curse me for the Old Ireland in Colour books, because you may have received either 3 copies of it during the COVID Christmases, or you had to post this to your family in America or Australia, and it's quite a heavy book, so I'm sure it costs quite a penny to post it to your relatives. But anyway, the artificial intelligence angle is that essentially, black and white photographs, if you want to colorize them, traditionally would have taken a lot of time, where you have to colorize all the different parts, all the clothes, all the the hair and the hats and so on. And I used an artificial intelligence system called Deoldify, which helps with the colorization. So it basically automatically applies a certain amount of color to black and white photographs. And on top of that, then I use systems like Photoshop to do more manual work on top of that. I think in terms of the benefit for humanity, because colorizing photographs, obviously it's generating a greater interest in history, and we are renewing our connection to the past. But it's also a serious angle, because it's being used by people in reminiscence therapy. So people who are trying to remember, when they were young, they might have problems forming new memories. They want to connect to the present. These colorized photographs are actually quite useful in terms of getting people to talk about when they were young. I've heard so many stories of grandparents sitting around the book talking about the images, how things were different with their children and their grandchildren, and just the impact of something which is an innocent colorized photograph is just amazing.
Yeah, no, I just spent a few days with my 94-year-old mother, and I'm one of 11 kids. We all wrote stories about our memories of our mother, and just reading those stories was the best. But I'll plug that particular application. But Sergio, you're building on top of blockchain technology. You're solving a real problem with respect to supply chain technology. Did you start with the technology? Did you start with the application? How did you wind up focusing on blockchain?
Yeah, in my case, I didn't start because of blockchain. I started with data, with big data, working on that. And in one moment, I have like a personal reflection that it was, where is the security of the information? Everybody's with our mobile phone, we're with the internet connection, and we're creating data. But what is the security of that data? There is no technology to keep the security nowadays. That's part of the cybersecurity. We realized that the only way to solve that, it was to trust in another company or trust in someone to let that information. So there is no privacy in internet nowadays. So in that way, I arrived to, let's say, to blockchain through Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency. I started to investigate about that, and I realized that it was really difficult to use blockchain nowadays. You need to know about how to develop a smart contract, you need to know about wallet, you need to get tokens. So it's like how everyone is going to use that if it is really difficult to use. I can imagine my grandmother using blockchain, let's say. No? So it was a big challenge in the technology. we started to work on that, and also we realized that it was not legal validity on blockchain nowadays. So it was something that we wanted to go ahead. We take the challenge in code contract, and we demonstrate. We started with blockchain, and we started to apply in business. Let's say the technology is a good part of the solution, but it's not everything. Let's say, for me, the technology is the way to get something. It's not the solution to get something. So the real case of blockchain, I think, is going to be with the human use case, I think.
I'll just say something about maybe blockchain applications. Seamus and Sergio, it's very interesting to hear about what you're working on as well, because it's quite related to what I'm interested in. I think it's good to have a kind of a definition of what is blockchain, because it's one of these words that's very much hyped, you know. It's thrown into, I've seen so many press releases, you know, I do a lot of work with startups through Tech Innovation, NUI Galway and the Portershed, but it's thrown into press releases like artificial intelligence. So blockchain, the definition I like, it's one from Ginny Romerty, who was the CEO of IBM and now the chair, and she said that, you know, what the internet did for information, blockchain does for transactions. And the whole idea is you make transactions more open, more transparent, more trustable, a bit like the internet made information more open and more accessible. So, you know, we often hear about blockchain in terms of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and, you know, obviously you've mentioned various you know, failures in terms of, you know, value dropping and so on. But the technology that blockchain enables, what blockchain enables is better trusted transactions. And transactions happen all the time. The problem is people maintain different records of what happens in those transactions. So if I sell something to, you know, a shop, if I'm a supplier, I have my records and they have their records. And the whole idea of blockchain is to unify that and to make it more open and transparent and trustable. And there's lots of applications. It's not just Bitcoin. You can use it for, like, we have projects in NUI Galway around peer-to-peer energy sharing for communities on the Aran Islands. We have projects around the supply chain in terms of, you know, food security and trusting the movement of food items through the food supply chain. So it's the same enabling technology, but there are just so many applications in terms of working with transactions, and, you know, transactions are in everything. There could be legal transactions where court documents move from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction. You know, really the possibilities are just limited by your imagination. And as I say, it's good to think about the positive aspects, like our panel is about the benefits to humanity, and there are so many positive aspects to these technologies.
And are you going to create NFTs of these colorized photos?
Well,
when's the auction? When's the
you
drop?
may joke, Seamus, I've already been approached by a number of startups asking me to create NFTs of colorized photographs. So yes, you got there ahead of them.
But talking a little bit about your application, Javier, and talking about openness. So, you know, if we look at what's been happening with AI, it's shifted from people building core AI systems to building on top of state-of-the-art models. Can you talk a little bit, like you were able to apply current state-of-the-art models to this problem of low resource, quote-unquote, language like Basque. Talk a little bit about how you did that and what you built on top of.
Yeah, of course. It's very important, the open source code culture, that it's happening right now with, like, big tech companies share their technology, the software, for people, for the community to use. Maybe this is a method to get talent, the best talent of the world, because you get accustomed to work with this code. But this also gives you the opportunity to build, like, with low resource, or maybe low, like a small team, with a small team. You can build on top of this technology and be creative in starting not from zero, let's say. Yeah. So you get on track and get speed with the state-of-the-art technologies. So it's very helpful for any innovator, any new creator to have this open source software all over the internet.
How long would it take you to build translation automated from Gaelic to Basque? How long?
Challenge.
You mean like a speech-to-speech?
We've got a budget holder right here. How long and how much?
How much? I mean, usually that's the thing. Because of this open source software culture, the main problem is to obtain data. Okay. As I said, to be a minority language, the problem is that you have no open source data. So the most of the work is to build these databases, even if they're small. You have to be efficient to do it fast, and then the models are you can do them like pretty fast using open source software.
And we're seeing sort of new marketplaces emerge for data, right? Hugging Face and other kind of marketplaces emerge. Are you guys doing anything around facilitating more open exchange of data using blockchain technology?
Yeah, in the case of blockchain, it's everything open source. So you can go to GitHub, let's say, and you can download the old code and you can deploy. So nothing is private on blockchain. It's the culture. Okay. Everything is about the community.
Right. And from your perspective, you know, you're in NUI Galway. Are you seeing sort of a new level of innovation result from this, and you're working with startups and people in sort of Galway, and can people in sort of rural Ireland take advantage of some of this open innovation?
No, for sure, and I suppose, you know, as we've heard, you know, more open systems, more open software, but also more open hardware is making new things happen. Just in parallel, I work with 3 Science Foundation Ireland research centres. One is data analytics, called Insight, another is smart manufacturing, which is called Confirm, and the other is AgTech, which is called Vista Milk. And data obviously underlies all of these things. So, you know, the availability of better data, we do a lot of work around standardization of kind of data formats to make it more accessible. So I'm involved in a project called Onto Commons, which is around data standards for materials and manufacturing. But just in parallel, one of my PhD students was defending his PhD, and his work was on working with data, but on low resource computing systems like edge devices, you know, Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. These are all low power, low cost computers that have become extremely accessible. So he just finished his PhD in the past hour and defended it on the topic of, you know, managing this data classification across these low resource PCs, so the computers. So the availability of, you know, open source libraries, platforms, you know, but also I think the other part, Seamus, is how accessible it has become to high-powered computing systems, you know, in our homes. So GPUs, which are basically the graphical processing units used in many gaming PCs, are now being used to do a lot of AI deep learning applications, and they've become so much more accessible. So you can do, you know, hard stuff a lot quicker. Like the colorization software I use uses these GPUs or gaming systems to basically carry out colorization in a fraction of the time than would have done a while ago. So there's, I suppose, a combination of kind of things that come together: open source systems, you know, better access to data, agreed formats for data, high-powered and low-powered computing systems, and the more open, the better. Blockchain, of course, as well.
Right, and just so it sounds like things are speeding up, things are more open. How soon before your grandmother can use blockchain technology? How pervasive will it get? Is it something that will just disappear and we'll know it's real when we don't even think about it? It'll just be like sort of TCP/IP. It'll be like a protocol, or, you know, that we call the internet. When will blockchain be mainstream?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Let's say, in my opinion, I think blockchain will be under our solutions. We will not know if we are using blockchain or not.
Yeah.
Because it's like we are thinking now, for example, as you said before, NFT. We are thinking to use NFT, and we are looking about how to use NFT. But the problem, I think, or the question will be just the opposite. How can I make something, my own property, on internet? Maybe it could be the NFT the solution, but maybe no. Maybe there are other solutions, other technologies to make it more effective than use blockchain nowadays. So in many times, I think the best moment of blockchain will be when we are using it without knowing that we are using it.
Right, and point a little bit about sort of you're working in this area of language and applying AI to language. What's the ultimate vision here? What will your world look like in 2 or 3 years? Or in 5 years? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, continuing with this speech-to-speech translation, maybe we can move along from the world with fully automated translations to speak between each other without any barriers. And maybe I think sometimes I think that Europe has a lot of languages, and we talked about today about how Europe has to speed and boost the AI technologies, the industry, and the networking. So maybe this would be like break barriers in Europe and make things more tight, or the market more tight, maybe. So this would change the scenario completely.
And
So,
it's not that far away, really.
Yeah, it's not that far. That's in 5 years. I see maybe transparent speech-to-speech translation. So we'll talk each other without barriers, let's say, and this will be a revolution, I think.
And it's needed. And I'll just give you one anecdote. My wife is an occupational therapist working with seniors, and she'll call in a remote interpreter, and she's working with a cognitively challenged senior, trying to explain something very simply, and then it's a long conversation in Cantonese, and the person's confused. So I can see a real need. What do you think?
Yeah.
What's the most exciting thing you're working on, John, that you think will shift things in the next few years?
Well, I suppose some of the things, Seamus, like obviously our world is changing, right? You know, we've heard obviously, you know, directly from Kiev this morning in terms of the problems. We know the knock-on effects that's having in terms of the food ecosystem, supply chains. We've seen, because of COVID, the challenges around manufacturing and getting parts and getting supply. So, you know, you were asking earlier about innovations and where are startups going. They're going to go where the problems are. You know, they're going to go where the paying customers are. AI, of course, can be used for so many things. It can be used for, you know, helping with our languages. It can be used for self-driving cars. It can equally well be used to tackle very serious problems we have in the world, whether it's food supply, manufacturing. So, like, we're working on, for example, using deep learning, which is a form of AI, to help better predict when machines in factories are going to break down. So it's called predictive maintenance. So instead of waiting for the machine to break down, you're looking at all of the logs for the machines, and you're using deep learning to try and identify before the machine breaks when it needs to be repaired. And again, this is using a form of AI which wasn't possible. There were ways to do this, but because AI has advanced and deep learning is a better way to do certain types of things, it can be used to help with, you know, machines breaking down. So you imagine problems in the supply chain. You can imagine all of these issues around, we can't buy cars because they can't make enough of the chips. We can't buy computers because, you know, again, there's blockages in different parts of the supply chain. At least if we can start to free up certain things there, we can start to solve some of the issues. But more seriously, I think the food supply chain, you know, I suppose if you're looking at 5 years' time, this is where there are going to be serious issues if things continue as they are. And we're having warnings of it now. We're seeing people, the UN and so on, tweeting about it. But that's certainly, you know, I don't think it's an exciting thing where things are happening. I think, unfortunately, it's a place where things have to happen in terms of new innovations, and AI being one of the technologies, blockchain a subset of that, which can help. But, you know, there's lots of things we need to do here.
This is great. Thank our panelists for a great conversation. Thank you all.